I think One Nation's been the only consistent political party for the last 20 years.
They're not talking about you. All right, well, let me tell you, One Nation is talking about you.
It's like the media's run away from One Nation. They're too scared to ask us any questions, mainly because we're straight talkers and we've got the answers.
This is like a call to arms. You guys need to start making the real decisions and who you're going to vote for.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the ExCandidates. My name is Tripp, and as always, I'm joined by Zahra. How you going, Adam?
I'm good, Stephen. How you going, mate?
I'm pretty good. And another Victorian candidate on tonight. We've got Peter Richardson. How you going, Peter?
Yeah, good, thank you.
And
welcome aboard, Peter.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Now, you're running in North-Eastern Metropolitan in the upper house at the upcoming Victorian election. It's getting very close now. Can you give us a bit of a background on who Peter Richardson is?
Well, I'm a father, grandfather, husband, and small business owner. Spent some time briefly in the police force. Really didn't like it, but it was an interesting experience, and it probably served me well. Although I didn't stay in very long, it confirmed a lot of things to me. It was almost like it was a part of my journey, if you like. I hate that word, but anyway, it just made things a little clearer to me. Probably things I already knew, but just confirmed them. So, and I think that is going to help me in this in the run up to the election, and hopefully after that when I get in, when I get into the upper house.
And what is the small business that you operate?
So I'm a subcontractor to a big company that, that services council hard waste collections. And I've got some garbage trucks that go all over the state, and actually into New South Wales even. So
yeah, okay.
And I've been doing that I had the break out of it to go into the police force, but I've been doing it around about 25 years now. So
you clean up the waste, and now you're going to clean up the politicians.
Going to give it a shot.
Well, that's good. It's good that we got you there to do it. You know, like it's been pretty bad. We've heard a lot of things about Dictator Dan, and we know that he's what's his another nickname you were just saying before? Teflon Dan.
Teflon Dan, yep.
So what? Nothing sticks to him. Everything just slides off.
Well, something that I suppose I have to be a little bit careful what I say here, but I do. There's no charges, so maybe I don't. One of the things that's very much in the news at the moment is a crash from 2013, so pre him being Premier, but he was certainly, he was only a year from being Premier. According to he and his wife, a bike hit their car down there when they were on holiday. And anyway, the young bloke at the time, I think he was 14 or thereabouts, some serious damage, lost part of his spleen, he had broken limbs, etc., etc. He was in a bad way. Now, the Premier and his wife's story was that he hit them, so he hit them and the T-boned them. If you look at the photos, that was pretty unlikely. But anyway, I wasn't there. I'm not saying I know what happened, but here's the thing. It doesn't matter because they left the scene of a serious accident.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the police didn't follow it up. No one was ever breath tested. They went to their holiday house and took the kids there. They had the kids in the car. But you can't leave the scene of a serious accident, particularly if there's serious injury, and there was.
Yeah.
That is an indictable offence, and there was no charges came out of it. So
basically, you've got this guy lying on the ground in a serious condition, and what they've just scooted off, left him there.
They called 000, left the scene, and left someone else to look after him.
Really?
Yep.
Isn't that considered a hit and run?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yep, you can't leave the scene of a serious accident, and there's not even a grey area there. It's that's what happened. There's no denying that happened, and the police didn't charge him.
It looks like some of that Teflon slipped off. Sorry, keep going.
Supposedly, she was driving.
It looks like some of that Teflon slipped off and went onto some steps of another holiday house that he was on as well. You probably should stay away from holiday houses, the old Dan Andrews.
Maybe you should give up going to holiday.
Yeah, well, I definitely heard about the accident. I know there's a big focus on it, but I'd never heard about him leaving the scene of the crime. Maybe the reports that I listened to left that big nugget out of the report.
You'll find it. It's not hard to find. It's in the mainstream media. So.
That's incredible. So, is he taking a lot of heat from that, or people?
Not as much as he should.
Yeah. Imagine if it was like Tony Abbott or or even Pauline Hanson, for example. If she'd done something.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, imagine if it was just a regular person.
Yeah. Well, I looked it up today. It's actually an indictable offence that could attract a penalty or a jail term of 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
the reality is almost no one would get that, but that's potentially what it could be. Yeah.
And when you're on the ground talking to your constituents, are they talking about it? Is it a big issue for everyday people?
I'm finding so many things I've actually got to bring up with them. People just don't listen. They don't look. The information's out there. There's so much out there that slips by because we're walking around with earmuffs on and really dark glasses or something. I mean, I tell people about. You would have heard about the pandemic bill. But you may not have heard about the omnibus bill, for instance, which was maybe 9 months prior to the pandemic bill. So now keep in mind that there would have been some amendments. So I'm not quoting it. After the amendments, but this is what he put forward: that if you are perceived to be a danger to public health, perceived to be, you haven't gone out, doing nasty things to people, passing on the virus, whatever, you are perceived to be a threat to public health. He was going to license, I suppose, people that weren't police to come to your home, arrest you, detain you for an unspecified amount of time and potentially take your children away for 3 years. Again, you can look that up in mainstream media. There. If that is not communism, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a bit like the brown shirts of the SS, doesn't it? What they used to do back in the day.
Yep. Yeah. But I go around telling people about this and they surely not. I say, look it up. It's there in the Age. It's there in the Herald Sun.
Yeah.
They're things that they should be posted and shown. And with that bill, so you guys would have the same system as we have in the state, like the Hansard system on the parliamentary website.
Yep.
That would all be documented on there anyway, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not hidden. One of the things that I'm finding is that it's almost like they put it out there in front of us, knowing that no one's actually going to look anymore. We've become a pretty apathetic country now, and if we continue down that path, we're getting the politicians that we deserve.
Yeah, well, that's what they're relying on. People are so caught up with their everyday lives, and the cost of living's going up. People are having to work long hours. They're trying to raise a family, and sometimes ignorance is bliss. They don't want to know about it because they've got enough on their plate as it is. So having to deal with some horrendous bill like that, how do they incorporate that into their own lives? It's just.
I'm sorry, but you're being a little bit kind there, because what about the parents that just hand their kids an iPad, a 2-year-old kid, and they're keeping occupied with an iPad or a phone? we've got to wake people up. We've got to stop them being so blasé about life in general. We've got to say to people, handing a kid an iPad is not a good thing, and parent them properly. Be a part of them actually growing up. And I know that's a bit of a diversion from the subject, except when you think about it, that we're being programmed to just be. It's like, here's a shiny thing.
Yeah.
Here's a shiny thing. You focus on that shiny thing, and we'll go about doing everything that we want, and you won't even notice.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there, and I can understand it as well. I think that more pressures from from outside are leading to that as well. I think that the pressures of cost of living, as Stephen raised, also don't really give parents the greatest option. If you've got both parents at work, all the subsidies for childcare now that it never used to be. So, you have to put your kids in childcare, right? So you basically, and that's part of the indoctrination cycle as well. So the idea is to get rid of the family unit. So mum and dad go to work, the child goes to daycare, upwards of 10 hours a day. Okay. And then what happens is then they come home. Mum and dad maybe cook, maybe grab some takeaway, whatever they do. They're so tired that, sometimes they, I can understand on their point of view of throwing the iPad in the kid's face until bedtime, which I also don't really agree with. I can't say that I'm not guilty of doing it sometimes. We're all guilty of it. But what happens is it's definitely something that is also done through situation that we've been put in. I think through poor policy and poor financial and fiscal management of our states and of our country.
Well, this is obviously a federal issue, not a state issue that I'm about to talk on. But if ever I get some say in policy, and preferably, I do, and I can expand on that to federal policy. There's a lot of couples that would like to have one of them at home bringing up the children. And all we have to do to make that happen is, with taxation, we make it worthwhile. We enable, a one-income family to do okay financially, because in the end, if we tax those one-income families a lot less, we're probably breaking even anyway, because we don't have to finance their childcare. It's a pretty simple equation. But as I say, that's a federal matter. It's not what we're talking about. I can't have any effect on that policy.
But it's a good theory, because you need to have these ideas. See, these fresh ideas of, ear on the ground and listening to what people really, really want. I'm sure that there are a majority of people who would want, and it doesn't matter if it's the mother, it doesn't matter if it's the father, right? Would want one parent staying home. Hell, I would stay home if I could. And I would if my wife wanted to go out and work. I mean, she's a graduate. I'm not a graduate. If she wanted to go out and work full time, and I would take the role of the child raising parent, I'd be more than happy to drive the kids to school and bring them home and make them lunches.
And that works 7 days a week. I mean, take a week off, you'd be bored still.
Oh well,
But that sort of policy is looked upon as being a sexist policy, because they assume that I'm talking about the woman staying home. As you say, it's got nothing. Make your choice, one or the other. I don't care. But socially, we'll all be better off if one parent stays home. And financially, I'm pretty sure we'll break even or even better.
Well, our children would be better off, and that's the most important thing as well, because the next generation are going to get. And I can attest to this as well. And we're told to keep saying the same thing over and over again, because one day somebody will get bored of it and start listening, right? That's another Stephen Tripp line. But I was going to say, what we got to do is, if we, I can attest to this, because when we had the COVID lockdowns in New South Wales, and we did divide, both of us were able to work depending on how it worked. So I'm also a small business owner, and because I deal in security and it falls under mental health, safety, and security. So I could actually still go and do work, provided that window coverings were damaged, or providing that they were after a security door or something. So I could go and work. But I actually did have I always consider myself to be quite hands-on with raising my children and homework and stuff like that, and sporting events and whatnot. But when you are working 7 days a week, it is a bit hard to be hands-on. But I did have 2 to 3 weeks, I think 3 weeks solid block of raising the children at home while my wife actually did go and work. And it was an eye-opener. It was amazing how curriculums change. New South Wales One Nation is really big on the education curriculum. We chair the committee for education through the Honourable Mark Latham. So we do have a fairly good insight on it, and everything and all the research I've been doing on it, you can just see how the children are going down and backwards. And considering like stuff that my daughter was probably learning in, she's in year 5 now, so she would have been in probably year 4 and 3 when we were doing in the lockdowns. I had learnt that stuff in year 2. Most of that stuff I had learned most of it in year 2. So she was already against. I think if you compared students from now to like in the 80s or 90s, you would see a significant difference in the way the curriculum's gone. So, but back to your point about childcare and stuff like that, and one person at home, you're right. I think if parents had the ability to have one person at home, then the children would far more benefit from it through schooling, through family, through community. We would have a lot less of the issues that we have now. Kids would definitely know more about who they are and where they come from and what they want to be.
It's one of the sad things about our society is that parents say that one of the reasons they send their kids to childcare is because they get to socialise. Well, when I was a kid, I got to socialise with my neighbours' kids.
Yep.
We were a community back then, and it's one of the things that's gone missing in Australia. When I know we've got a neighbour behind us and one next door, and I know them. We don't get together much. We talk a bit, but most people don't even know who's living next door to them anymore. And the anonymity of our neighbourhoods is a really bad thing, because what used to happen is that kids used to go, well, I can't do the wrong thing because Joe down the road's going to see me and he's going to tell me parents and they're going to kick me butt.
Yeah.
So, anonymity is not a great thing, and that's what most of our society is now. But that maybe has come about in part because of the childcare thing. As I say, my parents and my mum used to take me to the neighbour's house. I used to play with those kids. Across the road, used to play with those kids. And then as you got older, you didn't need your parents to take you there. You just went and played with them. So, it's a different world now, that is for sure. Something that I talk to people about is I'm looking at both you blokes. I think you're a fair bit younger than me.
Wait. Okay, wait a second. Who do you reckon's older?
Oh, God.
Oh, Joe, I don't want to get myself in trouble here.
You're not going to get close, mate. You're not going to get in trouble.
I'm going to go with Stephen. I reckon he's a little bit older. Is that fair?
Again.
Every time.
Is that right?
No, it's not right. I'm 5 years older than you, aren't I, Stephen?
Old men look so much more handsome and young, don't they?
Oh, yeah. He's like a fine wine. He's definitely better with age. Sorry, back to your point there, Peter. Sorry about that. I just had to do that.
Yeah, where was I going with it? Yeah, where I was going with that is that so I'm 58 years old. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And to me, that was clearly a fantastic time in a great country. And I feel sad to say to my kids, my grandkids, you're not growing up in as good a time as what I did. and it's a very easy argument to make. And I suppose it's all relative, but we had freedom. We had enough food on the table. We didn't have too much, and that's a problem. Kids have got too much now, too many choices, etc. But it was a great life. And, our kids today, so many mental health issues, etc., and it's because of the world that we've created for them. And it's incredibly sad. And I feel bad when I say to 30-year-olds, you're not growing up in the country that I did. But I make the point that I'm not telling them that because I want to gloat. I'm telling them that because, particularly the 30, 35-year-olds, it's their world. And if they want it to become a great place to live again, they better do something about it.
Well, I don't want to make you feel too old, Peter, but my dad's 62 and he says the exact same thing. And I've heard a lot of people in that generation say how great Australia was in the 60s and the 70s. What are we missing now? Is it just purely, you think of kids and they're so stressed out about climate change. They're so stressed out about, some of them are walking around with masks on because of COVID, all these issues. As Adam alluded to, the New South Wales has the fastest falling academic results in the world, and a 15-year-old boy in New South Wales school is 4 years behind his equivalent in China, and I'm assuming it's basically similar in Victoria. What happened? What happened from the 1960s and 70s until now? What did we lose as a country to get to this point?
Okay, So as far as I'm concerned, we're being divided. So we've got a situation where kids are not allowed to be kids anymore. They've been heaped on with all this pressure about, are you this sex or are you that sex? You've got to learn about all this diversity, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm not saying that everything that they're learning, I think they're learning it too early. I think it's a necessary evil these days for them to be looking at sex and drugs and all that sort of thing. They have to be educated on these things. I think it's happening too early. Let kids be kids. But an experience I had very recently with, I went into town. There was, in Melbourne here, there was on a Thursday, I think it was, there was an Aboriginal protest against the monarchy. Now, I'm not having a strong opinion on that. I think they were harsh on the Queen because she wasn't the one that created all the colonialism, etc. And in actual fact, she's backed it off somewhat over her life. I think they were a little harsh on her. I'm not a monarchist. I'm not a Republican. I'm saying our system's not broken, so why change it if they can come up with a decent republic to a model that's acceptable to the people and not just the politicians, then I'll look at it. But anyway, going back to my story, so I'm going in there with a sign that says, "This man must go," which is then a picture of Daniel Andrews. Agree or disagree, let's talk. So I'm trying to encourage people to come and talk to me. Well, I get in there, the protest's going, I give them a bit of space, they do their thing, and that's fine. And I'm nearby, so there's a few of them looking at my call flute and agreeing with what I'm saying. Their protest finished. I walked up to the steps of Parliament House. There was still a few people hanging around, and one of the guys would have been my age. And he didn't seem to quite fit the mould, so I wasn't sure where he fitted in, but he was clearly Indigenous. And anyway, I just started talking to him. The young people wandered off, and I continued the discussion with, I'll say his name, Keith. And it turns out he's a VicPol liaison officer. So he was there to liaise between the police and the protesters. And anyway, I was having quite a discussion with him, and I didn't know what he was doing there to start with. I had probably 10-minute discussion before I found out who he was. But I was just talking about his experience growing up. And I mentioned the word respect, and he said, "There's no respect today." And he said these exact words, "When we were growing up, nobody saw colour.
No.
Yeah.
So this fallacy that's out there that my generation were racist, we were divisive, we were, I'm the devil now apparently.
Yeah,
like
middle class white male. The
but
worst.
yeah. But back then, I mean, I had an Aboriginal mate in primary school. I went to a high school that was full of Italians, and I had my group of 7 mates. 2 of them were Italian, and you didn't even think about it. We were just kids, and that's the problem today. As far as I'm concerned, let kids be kids, and then they don't see colour, they don't see sexuality, they don't see religion, they just see kids. And, there's, I didn't play, it's not like all my mates were from all different sort of backgrounds and had all different ideas, because you don't gravitate to people who have all different ideas. But I treated everyone with respect. And if we had something in common, it didn't matter what colour they were, what sexuality, what religion. We got along because we liked football, or we played tennis, or whatever. The commonality was what determined whether you played with or socialised with a kid, not anything else. And that's not what happens today.
I was exactly the same in the 80s too. So, I was born 81. So I've, basically I remember probably, 83, 4, 5, like pretty much probably 84 and start, we used to play with the kids in the street. So, and it didn't matter. So I had great friends actually, and my street was a little bit diverse. So I'm what we would call first generation Australian for my family. So we're Maltese heritage, okay? The common factor was that we were basically all Christian in the so Christianity was probably the key factor through the whole. So we had similar morals, principles, and background at that point, okay? And it's not to say that any other religion's not good enough or anything. It's not that. I'm just saying that was something that I noticed, that because Australia had a solid Judeo-Christian foundation, we had Filipino children, families in our street, and then we had European people families in the street. We had Australian people in the street, and I remember our boys, the girls, we all played together. So
it's the same now, Adam. I mean, it's the same now. The only difference now is that you've got the media continually telling us that we're divided and that we need.
Yeah, I don't.
It's the same now. Like go into any street in Sydney, and I'm sure Melbourne's exactly the same. I know Melbourne's exactly the same. It's very multicultural, and there's all different races commingling and getting on. No problem, no issue at all.
I agree.
Yeah. The problem is,
I agree. I don't think it's changed.
Yeah. The problem is that the people that are pretending to unite us are actually the ones that are dividing us. Exactly. I went past a sign in Croydon, so Croydon's near where I live, outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and went past the Uniting Church. And the Uniting Church in Croydon, it's a big one. It runs an NDIS agency out of it, and probably a few other things, I think. And I it's a sign that's been up for a while, and I didn't notice for a start. And just I drove past it only a week ago, and I looked at it and thought, hang on. I took a double take, and I actually did a UE and went back again. I've ended up taking a photo of it. So the Uniting Church, big sign, Uniting.
I can see it. I've got it on your page.
That's uniting us, apparently, is it? What's missing from that picture?
Yeah, Stephen, can you pull that up?
I'll have a look, yeah.
And here we go. What's missing from there?
Well, we got every flag except the Australian flag.
Yeah, and you know what? That reminds me of the University of Sydney as well.
Well, the UTS. Yeah, the UTS had it. The trans flag, they had the pride flag, the Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander.
Torres Strait Island flag.
Every flag is the Australian flag.
That's right.
Yep.
Every flag except the Australian flag. And I don't understand. I agree with you there, Pete. I don't know how we're meant to be united under one flag or one country if all these big industry. I mean, Uniting Church do a lot of good work, but I'm telling you, it's big industry, and they and if they're not going to fly the Aussie flag, then we're much lost. I think if we don't start bringing that back.
Yeah, I mean that to me was almost the ultimate irony with calling themselves the Uniting Church, and it really is very indicative of where we are in this country. I think that highlights it beautifully. It's really sad. It's like we're ashamed of our flag. Well, I'm not.
No.
I'm not saying to them get rid of the Torres Strait Islander flag, the Aboriginal flag, the rainbow flag. I'm not saying that. Put the Australian flag there as well.
But if you speak to Aboriginal people, they probably agree with you. They probably think, well, we consider ourselves as Australian as well. I know I was listening to Josephine Cashman on a podcast recently. She was a candidate in the federal election for One Nation. And she was talking about how a lot of Aboriginal people are actually quite conservative in nature. And I think she said something like 70% of them actually marry white Australians. So they're not concerned about commingling at all. And it just seemed, I remember, I tell this story, the last time I was at Old Parliament House, because I'm a political geek and I love going to Old Parliament House and they've got the Museum of Democracy there. But the last time I was there, we actually had to get escorted out because there was a protest, and it was 2 days before they actually set the front doors on fire because there was an Aboriginal protest there. But when we were escorted out, we went out the side, we looked back to see what was happening. It was all white activists. There was no Aboriginal people there. It was all white people causing trouble. So who's actually behind all of this? Is it the true Aboriginal people that have a problem with supposedly, the Crown and our system of government, or is it the activists that want to use the Aboriginal people as a vehicle to advance their own political agendas?
I think there's probably, undoubtedly there's genuine people amongst them, but as I said, there's a lot of people that are out there dividing us. But what the people that are those people, the white protesters at Parliament House, for instance, and so many other protests, they don't realise what they are. The Marxists used to call them useful idiots.
Mm.
So they're doing the bidding for government, and they don't even realise it. They're crusaders that just go from one crusade to the next. And I thought about what would be an interesting little cartoon to do, and that would be that you see all these protesters wander. And keep in mind, I've been a protester recently, but so I'm not bagging all protesters, but we see the same people at nearly every protest, and you could have them walking down the street with a sign, and anyway, that protest end, they put down that sign and they go, what are we doing next? And they just go and pick up a different sign.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be, and it would be funny, and it would often happen that sign would be totally contradictory to what they were last carrying.
And you know it too, because you get these independent reporters that actually go to protests and they stick a microphone in front of them saying, what are you actually protesting here today? What message are you trying to get out? And they're like, they don't even know why they're there. They're just professional protesters that like to cause trouble. Who knows? Maybe they're getting some sort of pay from it or something like that. Some sort of benefit. We don't know. But how do we know how many of these protesters, what percentage of them are actually genuine? They actually genuinely believe in what they're protesting. But we probably should segue that into, you mentioned that you've been a protester recently as well. I guess being a candidate is in a way, it's a form of protesting. It's the next level up from protesting. What motivated you to be a candidate for One Nation and to put your face on the line and your reputation on the line to stand for election?
There's a man called Daniel Andrews was there. he was the catalyst. But I must say that I've considered it for most of my life. I've got to admit. Would I have done it without Daniel Andrews coming along? I probably wouldn't have, and I would have been disappointed in myself at the end of my life because I hadn't. But he's done me a favour, I suppose, and made me jump into this space. And I'll give it my best shot. And even after this election, I'll continue to try and. I've always thought there needed to be a third viable party, and I'm going to. And at the moment, One Nation isn't. We cannot grab the ultimate power. Maybe in time we can, but we're starting out now. I know Pauline started out a long time ago, and she's incredibly resilient. But when it comes down to it, she can't win the ultimate power. To me, it's almost certainly not going to be in my lifetime that there is a third viable party that can have the next Prime Minister or the next Premier of Victoria. But we've got to start on that journey because, to me, the duopoly that we have is part of the problem. It's just a revolving door.
Well, I can agree with you on some of those points, but what I say is that you don't need to lead to make a change. And what we need is one nation. One Nation is really the only other viable option as far as being able to actually run campaigns and if we were in a position where if we were gifted the spot, we could take it on board. We have the policies, we have the leadership, we have the structure to do it, but it does take time to build that. So I do agree with you on that point. But I can see from our leaders that are in Parliament and seated at the moment. So you do have Senator Hanson, Senator Roberts, you have the Honourable Mark Latham, you have Honourable Rod Roberts, you have the Honourable Sarah Gain. Right, those guys are making a difference in Parliament. I feel like that we are leading from the side. So a lot of our policies that we put forward, a lot of the policies that come from the other side, we hold them to account. And I think that Australia would be in a worse situation if we didn't have those 5 or 6 members in there. I think Australia would be a lot worse if we didn't have Stephen, if we didn't have you, yourself, Peter, or me, or Rebecca, or any of the candidates who are standing forward to raise the awareness. So I do think you're correct, but I also think that it's not about having the crown. It's about what you do with from the side of what you can with the power that you have. So I'm not trying to contradict you there, but I do think that. That's what I've been campaigning on at the moment. That's the trend that's been happening on with some of my social media is that we're leading. We're already leading. It's just that we're leading from the back stalls.
Yeah. I'm not. You're not contradicting me at all. I can assure you of that. But the thing that I'd say is that I still think we need to build beyond what we are now. To be a third viable party that actually can take the ultimate power. But how we've got to do that is by changing the mindset of the Australian people, the Victorian people at the moment, so that they believe that there can be another viable. At the moment, there is going to be a lot of people voting for the minor parties, but none of them will be thinking that there is going to be anything but a Liberal or a Labor Premier. And they're right, but it's because of the Australian people's mindset. So somehow we've got to change that, and that's going to take some time.
Yeah, definitely.
But sitting in our house, hopefully we can make a difference in the short term, so that in the long term, the ultimate goal can be obtained.
No, I definitely agree with you. The first speech I made as a candidate for One Nation at Blacktown, Adam was there, was talking about exactly the same thing that you just talked about One Nation emerging as a third major party, because country needs it. In my view, the country needs it because Liberal and Labor are basically the same, or different sides of the same coin. They're basically got the same policies. Nothing changes when they come into government. Look, you can see that during the pandemic. Victoria, you guys had the strictest lockdowns in the world under a Labor government, but here in New South Wales under a Liberal government, we weren't far behind. And people like myself lost my job. Adam, your wife, lost her job. So even though it wasn't quite as tough in New South Wales here compared to Victoria, it was still pretty bad, and especially in certain areas of Sydney, it was very bad as well. So Australia definitely needs a third party to rise up, and from my perspective, is One Nation is just sitting there waiting for that opportunity. We've got the policies, we've got the people already in Parliament, we've got the foundation already there. But it is a long game. It definitely is a long game. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight. And if you look at the Greens, when John Howard was in power, the Greens would get maybe 2%. Now they're up to 10%, maybe even higher in some areas, to the point where they've actually got a lower house member in Parliament now. To think that in John Howard's era was unthinkable. So it may be unthinkable now for One Nation to win lower house seats, but maybe 10 years' time, 15 years' time, it might not be unconsidered. Maybe it might actually happen. So these are the things that we definitely need to work towards. But in the here and now, this is the first time that One Nation has run in the Victorian state election. You're running for the upper house. You're running in the North-Eastern Metropolitan. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
North-East Metropolitan.
So you're actually got a good chance of to being elected for the upper house, which will be a roadblock. And Mark Latham talks about this with the New South Wales state election coming up. He's like, well, we might not win government, but we can be a roadblock to the madness, of a Labor government pushing through all their crazy policies. We can be the roadblock, the vanguard to protect the people from those policies. I just want you to talk about your electorate a little bit. What is the scope of it? How big is it? What area does it cover? And just let everyone know that you'll be representing this area of Victoria.
So I lived, I'm going to explain this. So you're looking at down the bottom there. I'm not seeing it very large, but anyway. So Bayswater, that's sort of 10 minutes from where I live. Croydon, again, probably 5 minutes from where I live. You go across to Glen Waverley, which is in actual fact next door to Daniel Andrews' electorate. And then you head north. So you go through some nice areas of, out around Bulleen and Warringah and Eltham. Quite leafy sort of suburbs, and then out to Mill Park, which is getting fairly north and heading towards a fairly industrial area out that way.
So, but it's definitely
quite diverse.
Definitely the outer suburbs of Melbourne.
Yeah. So northeast, probably most of it you'd class as east, but that very top section is certainly heading into the north. The bottom end where I am around Bayswater and Croydon district there, we're at the base of the Dandenong Ranges.
And you're in small business yourself. Obviously, the lockdowns played a big impact on small business, especially in Melbourne. Do you have any indication of the businesses in your area and how they struggled through that period? Are they picking themselves up now, or did some just fade away and not come back?
Oh, there was certainly a big element that didn't come back. But the big problem at the moment, and I certainly experienced it, was, and to some degree still am, but you drive around Melbourne now, particularly, Bayswater district there's a fairly big industrial area there. And every second factory has vacancy signs. There's still a major problem with getting workers.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a problem. I think probably the factories and that survived. It's more the shops, cafes, and that there's a lot of vacancies in main streets and that now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've noticed this. I mean, the pattern's similar across the board. Did you have what are the mandates like down there at the moment? Has a lot of the mandates been eased and lifted? We can see now that we're starting to get our Chief Health Officer Kerry Chan. You know, she's starting to come on again on the government site saying, oh, you know, we're getting an increase in, you know, some CBA 75C DF variant, and you know that's going to be really bad for everybody, and this, that, the other. And then we've seen Queensland has also gone to, you know, code amber alert, because you know that's, you know, what they're using the preschool traffic light system because, you know, they don't respect.
Sorry to cut in. I actually heard today of schools in Sydney in my area that have been locked down for COVID just recently. So
What, really?
Yeah.
As in, like, they shut the school down?
Yeah, because of COVID cases.
Then here we go again, history repeating, right?
They're just
like, it doesn't. I don't understand how we can.
Yeah, there's one reason. There's only one reason why we haven't got any sort of mandate at the moment. We're probably freer than any other state at the moment, I would suggest. And why do you think that is?
And just until after the election.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was, you know, hate to act like Nostradamus here, but everyone was saying, late last year there's going to be lockdowns at Christmas time, and there's going to be a lockdown in January and February. And I was saying back then there won't be any more lockdowns in Victoria because there's an election coming. And since I started saying that, there hasn't been any. And that's the only reason. I mean, there's supposedly is more deaths now than there ever has been. So how does it make any sense? So they'll say, oh, but everyone's vaccinated. Well, you got to that in itself doesn't make much sense, does it? But anyway, we probably don't need to go down that path because we've been down that path so many times before. But yeah, as I say, there's only one reason we haven't got lockdowns, and that's why people should be fearing Andrew's getting back in, because he's got another 4 years.
And while we're on the topic of Dan Andrews, I just want to be mindful as well that I also agree that probably eased up a bit because of the election. And it seems to be the trend anyway. It always seems to be whatever the hot topic is, they ramp it up and then it drops off a little bit until the election cycle's finished. And then whoever comes in after, or if the same person comes back in again, it ramps back up again to kind of where it was. So we've seen that in the past. So, I mean, we can't say that it won't ever happen. But what I was going to say as well, there's also another interesting thing. I don't know if you've seen the advertisers for it yet, but I'm pretty sure you'd be interested. Peter Credlin is doing a expose on the cult of Dan this Wednesday night. I'm not sure if you guys get the same programming as we get, but it's going to be on Wednesday night. So
yep,
that would be interesting to see him.
Love it.
Peter Credlin.
She's taken it up to him a few times, but the problem is she was on her own. She didn't have the support from the rest of the media. So, but hopefully she really goes at him hard in this thing. But one of the things I was saying to a young bloke I was talking to about all this stuff, and he was a little bit left leaning, but I think I want to change his mind, because I said to him that you can actually find a lot of truth in the mainstream media. But the problem is it's hidden in page 32, and it's a column about that big. But I've made a habit of going right through the papers and finding stuff. And the beauty of finding stuff in mainstream media is that some people only believe mainstream media. So if you can use mainstream media to convince them, if you pull it out of social media, you come up with a conspiracy theory, they're not going to believe it. But you pull it out of mainstream media, and all of a sudden it's right there in their face. The people that they've been believing for so long are telling them this. Well, how do we dispute that? Something that, so a cousin of mine, he made contact with me through a conversation that I had with my auntie. She's elderly, my uncle's elderly. I can't even remember the conversation, but he rings me up. I hadn't spoken to him for probably 30 years, and he rings me up and he says, I hear you're one of us, sort of thing. Because he was alone in his family, that, you know, as far as all this stuff goes, and not just believing what the media was telling him, etc. And so anyway, we've been talking a lot since, and but he said to me, my uncle Riley, he's a brilliant man. He's incredibly clever. He's brilliant with his hands, and he's, you know, so brilliant. He was. He's 80 something years old and not so capable anymore, but it's still a very smart man. And Lewis, his son, couldn't believe that he'd fallen for everything. You know, he was believing this. And I said to Lewis when he told me this, I said, well, maybe he's frightened. He said, no, he's not frightened. And then I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, well, here's the problem. So he's of an era where you could actually believe government. Well, let me draw back on that a little bit. The perception was, and most of the time you could believe government, you could also believe the media. We had people like Sir Eric Pearce and that who'd sit there on Channel 9 News at 6 o'clock, and, you know, he's totally believable, and he just wasn't just reading from a script. There was real journalism done, and you could believe your doctor because your family had the same doctor for 50 years. But I think that those elderly people now haven't changed their mindset. They haven't realised that the world has changed, and they can't believe all these people. So they need to look more critically at what's going on. But, you know, at that age, they're going to have trouble changing. But that's, I think, one of the dangers. Let me put it this way, I don't think he's a Labor voter. I think he's probably a Liberal voter anyway. But if you get my point, that they're rusted on, and they don't change their mind at this stage, regardless of the fact that they're having the wool pulled over their eyes.
Yeah, that's right. I think they've fallen for the fact that, I think that you're right. I think the tradition, look, Australians have traditions just as much as anyone else. They might, you know, come across not traditional, but there's a lot of tradition that they do. And, you know, what their family does and has done in the past, they continue to do as well. You know, I mean, we all do that. So I agree with you there as well. I think that, you know, some of the older generations had, you know, you had your charismatic, knockabout bloke leaders. You know, like I actually remember Bob Hawke, and I do remember Kim Beazley wasn't so. I don't think he was. I can't remember if he was.
Bad example.
And he wasn't so good. And I remember Keating, and I remember Howard as well. And, like, I mean, even John Howard, probably, you know, he wasn't your big, stout, kind of huge man, kind of masculine kind of guy, but he had some sort of charisma and persona about him. And, you know, that was believable. And I think, you know, Bob Hawke also had a personality that was kind of like a believable guy. You know, he's like a fella down the pub, you have a beer, you can kind of have a chat, and it felt like it was the truth. Whether they done the right by everybody all the time or by the country all the time or not, we don't know, right? Well, we do kind of know, but we'll just say we don't know at this point. But, you know, I think people are rusted on in the old ways of not so much what the leaders and the parties had certain policies that they followed or an ethos. And that's definitely changed now. So what happens is we know that the Labor Party aren't for the worker, the coal-faced miner, and fighting for the rights of the worker. Because, you know, as some of our leaders up here have said, you know, if you had a boss that would turn around and say to you, you know, you can't come to work unless you've had this experimental medical procedure, and I'm just using that as an example because that's the main one at the moment, okay, then where was the Labor leader or where was your union leader to say, well, wait a second, mate, you can't do that. That never happened. And then the liberal guys, libertarians believe in, you know, in the right to the bodily autonomy and your right to choose what goes in and out of you anyway, and your right to have a free choice. And what happens is that so they didn't even stand up for the worker or anyone either. So, they're against some of the policies and some of the ethos that they had as well. So you can see that the trend is really, and we all know it because we've all chosen at particular stages, federal, state, whatever, to run for One Nation, that One Nation are actually a culmination of, I believe, Liberal and Labor. They're the best values of both. I believe that we do stand what they used to be. We stand for the worker on the coalface. We want the average Australian worker to have a life. We want family unity. We want the family values. We want our children to be educated, right? And we believe in less government, and we want to have you to be free to make choices of your own body. So we're all for all that. So what happens is if you pick, we should really be getting any disgruntled Liberal or Labor constituent. We should be getting those votes, because if you have a look at our policies and if you have a look at our ethos, we've cherry picked the best of all and brought it together to make basically. I didn't know that red and blue mixed together makes orange, but apparently it does. So. That's where we're at. But I will tell you this, and this is something that I've been working on as well, is that you have your red, you have your green, and you have your blue coalition now. And I'm coining them the browns, because if you mix those three colours together, you get brown, and that's what we're up against. It's orange against brown, mate, at the moment. And I think with candidates like yourself and candidates like us, and we've interviewed a lot of you, your Victorian candidates, and you're all stand up. You all have a good personality and a good switched on to represent the people that you have. And I think I'm going to wish you the best of luck right now. That I don't think it's going to be a luck matter. I think it's about how much work you're going to put in. And I think you're going to put in a lot of work there, Peter. So good on you for all that. And I think you're going to be pretty damn awesome if you get elected.
I'll just quickly, I don't know how much longer this goes, but one of the things I'd say to particularly young unionists and that out there that are going to, because they're being told to vote Labor because Labor supplies them all the work, etc. And there's actually an ad, I don't know whether you know about the ad that's out there from the CFMEU saying that, and they use this word, mind you, they say that, yes, Daniel Andrews is a prick, but he's making us rich, pretty much, is what they're saying. But one of the things that they need to consider is that the Labor Party isn't what it used to be, and one of the beacons there, one of the alarm bells that they should look at is, and I can't believe it's actually happening. Why is big business supporting Labor now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There should be alarm bells there for them. Big business and small business used to support Liberal. There's a lot of people getting awfully rich out of Labor being in place. And as I say, there should be alarm bells, because that is costing us long-term our children's future. This is about my kids, about my grandkids. And they're convincing all these young unionists there with their Hiluxes and their big toolboxes on the back that you got to vote Dan because he's going to make us rich. Yeah, but the money's going to run out for one. I'll just quickly say too. So you've heard about the SEC, getting the SEC back up and going, State Electricity Commission.
Oh yeah, I did.
I don't know whether he's going to call it that or not, but that's what he's saying. And he told us all in the press conference that the funding for the SEC is going to be 49% superannuation. And we're talking a renewable energy SEC. And most of the super funds, of course, are union run. Yep. They're not going to say no to him, regardless of the fact that it's a really bad investment. And all these young blokes that are voting for Dan, because they're keeping him, their super is going to be
Mm-hmm.
Put it in a crude way, pissed up against the wall.
That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
Talked about the big companies in getting behind Labor now. Well, what are they invested in? Are they invested in these renewables? They're giving money to the Labor Party. They're invested in renewable energy on the side. They know they're going to get a huge kickback, and now they're dipping into superannuation, which has been a pot of gold that's been sitting there, and it's just been waiting for politicians to get their grubby hands on it. And what better grubby politician than Dan Andrews to get his hands on the amount of money, the tremendous amount of money that's in superannuation, and they're all controlled. The majority of them controlled by the union movement. That's why I work in construction. You never see the union on sites anymore. They don't need to be. They don't need to look after the worker anymore because they're getting all their money from superannuation. They don't care about. You barely get any strikes. Only if there's an election coming up and they want to do damage to the Liberal Party or they have a strike. They're not for the worker anymore because they've got this big pot of gold in superannuation. So I'm not surprised that that's happening down in Victoria, and I'm sure that'll be happening with the Albanese government eventually as well. But we are getting to the point now where we will be wrapping things up. It's getting to the time. But I just want you to quickly, Adam was talking about policies of one nation and policies of the other parties. We know you've got this tremendous policy booklet down in Victoria, which goes through all your state policies. Just quickly, as we're getting towards the end, just go through some of the policies and just touch on them that are important to you in your campaign. Which ones are the real standouts?
Can I do something slightly different here?
Yeah, go for it.
Something that's not in the policy booklet. So a bit one out of left field. And I don't think I'm going to be stepping on any toes here. I'm a member of an organisation called DACA, Drug Advisory Council of Australia. The chair of that organisation is Noel Ashby, who is ex-Deputy Police Commissioner of Victoria. And he says, and it's exactly the same words as I've used for many years, we have never fought the war on drugs. So that war has got to be fought because we're going, what's happening out on our streets is horrific. And there's more deaths on the road now from drugs than there is alcohol. And we need to do something different, yes, but what we're being told is being done is absolutely not being done. I've been in the police force. We do not arrest people for having a small quantity of drugs in their pocket. In actual fact, we don't even arrest them if they're high on meth and driving down the road. We take their licence off them for 3 months and give them a $497 fine. We're not jailing people for being on drugs. What we are doing is we're jailing people who commit serious crimes while they're on drugs. That's why the jails are full of drug addicts, because they do commit serious crimes because of drugs. I'm not saying jail is the right place for them, but we're not trying to get them off drugs. We're providing injecting rooms for them, but making no effort to actually get them off drugs. We need to build rehabs, and there has to be compulsory rehab for bad offenders. And we will be saving lives. And yes, some will go back to drugs, but if we get 1 or 2 out of 10 off drugs, we are so far in front, because the argument that it would cost us too much money to build all these rehabs, etc. It's a ridiculous argument, because the drug addicts are filling our psych wards. They're almost all on welfare. The burden on our society financially is huge anyway. Let's spend the money better, get them into rehab, and actually try and get them off drugs.
You have a few of those wellness centres that were built during the COVID pandemic that you could probably lease off the government to use for some of those rehab clinics you might be able to use, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to find. There's a place sitting out at Mickleham that's doing nothing, for instance, built for quarantine purposes. So, the facility's not the problem. The will is the problem. There is
could be a way to actually make some return on the taxpayer dollars that spent building that.
Possibly.
You know,
Cool.
get some addicts off the street, get some hard criminals off the street, get them in rehab, maybe get them introduced into society as able-bodied workers, and slow down the problem.
We're not doing any favours by leaving particularly ice addicts out on the street to keep doing what they're doing. You know, people will say, you're being heartless, they have their rights, blah, blah. They don't want to be ice addicts. They have gone into a spiral where the only time they feel good about themselves is when they're on ice. If they start to feel bad about themselves because of all the things they've done while they're on ice, this is the time I've got to have another hit. Take them out of that situation, deal with what's going on in their head, deal with the whole entire person, and at least make an attempt to get them off drugs, because they're not doing themselves any good and they're certainly not doing society any good. And I'm just going to chuck it out there. I don't call the injecting rooms harm minimisation strategy like Daniel Andrews does. I call it a harm maximisation strategy. And there's so many other. Do you know that when people have gone to jail but they're on remand waiting for sentence, they don't get any treatment for their addiction? And I know someone personally who's been to jail now 3 times, but each time they get sentenced with time served. So in other words, they've been in jail for 3 months without any treatment, walk out and go straight back to what they were doing. That's our system. Great system.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll be in there soon to clean those things up and put that in a private member's bill when you're in the upper house in the Victorian Parliament. We wish you all the best. We're very impressed by the Victorian candidates. We didn't know any of you really. We may have seen Warren and Ricky Lee run in the federal election, but we didn't know. We hadn't spoken to them before, and we've just been blown away by all of you guys. It's getting very close now. We're only about 2 weeks now before the election.
2 weeks yesterday.
Yeah.
Pre-poll starts tomorrow, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, good luck.
Busy man for the next 2 weeks.
Good luck with that.
12-hour days on pre-poll, mate.
That's the worst part.
The regions, Warren's region is impossible for him to cover. It's massive. So we've just got to do our best and hope that people, this sort of stuff that you're doing here and getting it out and all this social media stuff, that is in some ways the only way that we can cover what we need to do, and hopefully enough people see this sort of stuff and they start to realise who we are, and we present a viable option for them.
Well, let us know all about it. What is your social media, and how can people contact you and follow your campaign?
So what is it? Peter Richardson at vic1nation.org.au. Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links up there, so if anyone wants to reach out to you, learn some more. And
I'm starting to put plenty out there. I'm not a social media person, but you like the road there, do you?
Yeah, I think, Adam, you put up a post similar to this recently, didn't you, about the potholes? And
yeah, so the
sorry, go on.
The current meme at the moment is New Zealanders drive on the left-hand side of the road and Australians drive on what's left of the road. So that's the current meme that's happening.
I don't know whether up there they're trying to get away with it the way that Andrews is trying to get away with it and saying it's all about the floods, but I can guarantee you the roads were absolutely atrocious before the floods.
Yeah.
I've got trucks run up the highway all the time, and it's incredibly dangerous. And I won't go. Yeah, I was nearly going to quote an accident that I suspect might have come out of potholes, but I won't do that. So.
Yeah. All right. Again, thank you very much for coming on. Best of luck. We really mean that. We want to see you guys do really well. It's the first time One Nation's running in a Victorian state election, so we hope you really blaze a trail, and hopefully soon we can come down to the Victorian Parliament and interview you guys in person.
Yeah, that'd be
Great.
good.
It would be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So if you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please share it far and wide. We're trying to really get the name of Peter Richardson and all the Victorian candidates out there so people know what they stand for. They definitely stand for a lot more than Dan Andrews and the Liberal Party as well, for that matter. So please share it far and wide, and we'll see you next time.
So, yeah.
Thank you.